In this dramatized account, 4 minutes ago isn't just a timestamp, it's a detonation. A palace lawyer opens a sealed folder, expecting routine estate language, and instead finds a Queen's amendment so precise it feels like a trap laid from beyond the grave. One line, one restriction, and suddenly Camilla isn't being criticized, she's being blocked. Not from a speech, not from a room, from a key inheritance that rewrites the balance of power overnight. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update, because this lawyer, in this dramatized story, isn't the kind of person who panics. They are a machine insider, someone who lives in rules, clauses, and signatures. Someone trained to treat emotion like noise and paper like truth. They have seen family tension disguised as procedure. They have seen private battles fought through wording. But this time, when the folder opens, the air changes. Not dramatically, clinically. The kind of cold that tells you something irreversible has just activated. The amendment reads like a hard boundary, not vague guidance. It doesn't suggest. It doesn't recommend. It does what the palace does when it wants certainty. It defines. It restricts. It removes. And that is why it hits so hard. Because removing someone from an inheritance isn't just about assets. It's about belonging. It's about who is allowed to claim closeness, who is allowed to touch legacy, who is allowed to build influence lanes behind closed doors. In royal life, access is power, and power is always protected by paperwork. Immediate tension ripples outward like an alarm no one can hear. Phones light up. Doors close. Conversations stop mid-sentence. Whispers begin not because people enjoy gossip, but because they're trying to survive the meaning of what's been found. In this dramatized account, the palace doesn't ask, "Is this fair?" It asks, "Who knows?" Because knowledge is the first threat. Once people know, they react. Once they react, the story becomes real. And the inheritance is framed as more than money for one reason. Money is the cleanest language of control. An allowance can be adjusted. A role can be reduced. But a key inheritance, something tied to private spaces, trusteeship, archives, or access rights, doesn't just fund a life. It shapes a future. It determines who can host, who can staff, who can authorize, who can quietly influence. And in this dramatized story, that's why the amendment feels like a trap. It doesn't humiliate Camilla publicly. It restricts her privately in a way that changes her reach. The most chilling part is that the amendment doesn't just block. It names conditions. Conditions are how the palace turns morality into mechanism. They imply a reason without stating an accusation. They suggest that access must be earned, that behavior matters, that the Queen anticipated a scenario where power could be misused. In this dramatized account, the conditions feel like a Queen's final attempt to control the future from beyond the grave, without speeches, without scandal, without giving anyone the satisfaction of a public fight. Then a courtier murmurs the line that makes the room feel smaller. This changes who holds the keys literally. Because the keys aren't just metaphor. They're the reality of royal life. Keys to rooms. Keys to collections. Keys to records that rewrite perception. Keys to staff who know everything. Keys to spaces where decisions get shaped before the public ever hears a word. And if those keys shift away from Camilla, then the palace has just redrawn its internal map in ink. In this dramatized story, that's why the lawyer's hands go still. Not because they fear Camilla's reaction, but because they understand the chain reaction. This amendment will force Charles into a corner. It will trigger Anne's doctrine. It will alert the Wales household that a power lane has been closed. And it will awaken every courtier who survives by predicting which way authority is turning. One line can do all of that, because one line can determine who belongs near the future. The palace now has two immediate problems. The first is enforcement, how to honor the amendment without creating the impression of punishment. The second is containment, how to stop the amendment from becoming a public story before they can frame it. Because if it leaks, it won't be described as estate management. It will be described as a moral verdict. And moral verdicts are the most dangerous thing in monarchy, because they make the public feel like they're watching justice unfold. So the building tightens, not with anger, with procedure, internal review, clarification, trustee consultation. Language that sounds responsible while the palace decides what version of the truth it can afford. And inside that tightening, one unspoken question starts moving from room to room like smoke. Who hid this? Who delayed it? And who benefits now that it has surfaced? And once an amendment blocks Camilla this cleanly, the next question becomes unavoidable. What exactly is this inheritance? And why did the Queen lock it away from her? In this dramatized story, the inheritance isn't just wealth, it's leverage. The kind of leverage that decides who gets access to private spaces, private staff, private archives, and private influence, lanes the public never sees. That's why the palace reacts like it's a security breach. Because the wrong person holding the wrong asset doesn't look like inheritance, it looks like capture. Because key inheritance in royal life is rarely about a number on paper. It's a power base. Property rights that come with doors you can open and doors you can keep closed. Access lists that decide who is permitted inside sensitive spaces without needing anyone's approval every time. Trusteeship that grants authority under the cover of legality. Archives that hold history the palace can use, or history the palace must fear. In this dramatized account, the amendment isn't simply blocking a person from receiving something, it's preventing a person from becoming a gatekeeper. And gatekeepers in monarchy are more dangerous than loud rivals. A gatekeeper doesn't need a title to shape outcomes. They just need access. They need staff who answer to them. They need private rooms where decisions can be influenced without being recorded. They need the kind of silent power that never appears in a press release but always appears in results. That's why private assets shape public optics without ever being visible. You don't see the archive door open, but you see the story that emerges afterward. You don't see the staff meeting, but you see the schedule shift. You don't see the invitation list change, but you see who is suddenly close and who becomes distant. In this dramatized story, the palace fears one specific outcome: the asset becoming a consort influence hub. Because consort influence is already one of the most sensitive topics inside royal walls. It can look like support, but it can also look like capture if it grows too strong, too centralized, too protected by private assets. If the wrong person holds an inheritance that controls access and staffing, it doesn't just create comfort. It creates a private empire inside the institution. And private empires are how instability is born quietly. That's why the palace reaction is so immediate and so cold. They don't debate feelings. They react like people who have seen this risk before, in other forms, other eras, other courts, other families where influence moved faster than tradition could stop it. In this dramatized account, the palace treats the inheritance like a security matter because it functions like one. It controls the flow of people, information, and proximity. It determines who gets to stand near power when important decisions are forming. And proximity is where loyalty becomes leverage. The emotional beat under all this is ruthless. Camilla expected belonging, receives a boundary instead. Because in royal life, belonging is rarely spoken. It is implied through access, through invitations, through private spaces you are allowed to enter without being questioned. Being blocked from this inheritance isn't only loss. It is rejection in the palace's most painful language. You may be present, but you will not be permitted to hold the keys. And then comes the cliffhanger detail that makes the situation feel even darker. The lawyer hints the asset is tied to restricted categories. Restricted doesn't mean private. Restricted means controlled by rules that were written to survive challenge. It suggests the Queen anticipated pressure. It suggests she predicted someone would want access and decided, in advance, how to stop it. Restricted categories imply there are parts of the inheritance no one can touch without crossing a line the palace treats as sacred. In this dramatized story, those restricted categories could mean letters, diaries, private collections, private instructions, sensitive records, or even trust structures designed to protect certain truths from being redirected. And if that's the case, the inheritance is not only about power, it's about narrative. Because whoever controls the keys can shape what the next reign can hide or reveal. They can decide which stories get gently buried and which stories get quietly framed as truth. They can protect reputations or destroy them with the same calm administrative motion. That's why the Queen's amendment feels like more than a boundary. It feels like a safeguard against a future she feared. A future where someone might use proximity, access, and private influence lanes to reshape the monarchy's story from the inside. In this dramatized account, the Queen isn't just blocking Camilla from inheritance. She's blocking the possibility of private capture. And if this inheritance controls access and narrative, the story turns darker, because the Queen didn't just leave an asset, she left a weapon. Royal wars don't start with shouting. They start with paperwork. In this dramatized account, the palace lawyer reads the amendment twice, then a third time, because the language is too clean to be accidental. It doesn't insult, it doesn't accuse, it simply removes. And removal written by the Queen feels like a verdict that can't be appealed emotionally. Because the wording is surgical, built to withstand challenge. It leaves no soft edges for anyone to grab. No emotional argument can loosen it. No sympathetic interview can melt it. The amendment doesn't call anyone a villain. It doesn't even sound angry. It sounds final. And in royal life, final language is the most frightening language of all, because it means this was planned, approved, sealed, and placed where it would survive pressure. The lawyer's mind locks onto the details that matter. This isn't a draft. It's final, sealed, and activated by a trigger. That trigger could be time. It could be a change of status. It could be the moment a specific asset shifts hands. But whatever it is, the effect is immediate. The amendment isn't waiting for discussion. It's already functioning. And the moment that reality sinks in, the room doesn't fill with noise, it fills with calculation. Internal panic spreads the way it always does in the palace, quietly, professionally, through sudden phone calls and urgent check-ins that don't sound urgent unless you know the code. Who knew about it? Who kept it quiet? Who had eyes on this file before it surfaced? Because in this dramatized story, the real threat isn't only the amendment itself. It's the possibility that the amendment was hidden, or delayed, or kept off the radar until it was too late to stop. And that's the emotional beat that twists the knife. Staff fear the truth more than the press. The press can be managed with statements. Truth can't be managed once it hardens into record. Truth changes relationships. It changes loyalties. It changes what people can plausibly deny. And in this dramatized account, the palace reacts like it can already hear the chain reaction. Camilla's camp scrambling, Anne's camp stiffening, Charles forced into an impossible hinge position, and the Wales household quietly watching which way authority tilts. Then the lawyer sees the detail that makes everything feel even colder, a margin note referencing protocol integrity. Two words that sound harmless, but in palace language, they mean boundaries. They mean protection of the institution against private influence. They mean the Queen didn't just write a personal preference, she wrote a structural safeguard. And structural safeguards don't get negotiated away with feelings. That's when the cover-up scent becomes unavoidable. Someone may have delayed filing or visibility. Someone may have kept this amendment in a sealed layer of the system so that it couldn't be accidentally reviewed. Because if the amendment was truly meant to take effect, why wasn't everyone prepared for it? Why is the building reacting like it's been ambushed by its own paperwork? In this dramatized story, those questions don't create answers, they create suspects. And while the palace starts tightening around the file, the other half of the war begins. In this dramatized story, Camilla doesn't explode, she calculates. Because outrage looks guilty, and silence looks strategic. So the counterattack begins the palace way: private appeals, carefully placed concerns, and a sudden push to frame the amendment as outdated, unfair, or misunderstood. Not to deny it exists, but to weaken what it means before the public ever hears a whisper. Soft war tactics move first: briefings, alliances, and sympathy framing. People don't defend Camilla directly. They defend fairness. They defend stability. They defend modernization. They suggest the amendment is administrative, not intentional, an old instruction that never anticipated the present. That framing is important because it transforms the Queen's boundary into a bureaucratic mistake. And if it's a mistake, it can be corrected without admitting anyone is challenging the Queen's will. Pressure points are selected carefully: advisors who can argue reason, trustees who can argue discretion, protocol committees that can argue precedent. In this dramatized account, Camilla's camp isn't trying to win a public fight, it's trying to win an internal interpretation. Because interpretation decides enforcement. And enforcement is where power lives. The emotional beat is sharp: Camilla publicly composed, privately cornered. She can't look panicked, because panic looks like guilt. She can't look furious, because fury looks like fear. She has to look calm while everything underneath her feels suddenly reversible. And reversibility is what terrifies people inside monarchy, because it means nothing is guaranteed, not even the status you believed you'd secured. A hidden beneficiary emerges in the shadows, someone who profits if Camilla is weakened. Someone who gains access to influence lanes once hers are narrowed. Someone who looks helpful during clarification and becomes indispensable in crisis. In this dramatized story, the palace doesn't just survive shocks, it redistributes power through them. Then comes the cliffhanger suggestion that turns strategy into war: we can challenge the trustees. That sentence is dangerous because trustees are not just administrators, they are guardians of intent. If you challenge trustees, you challenge the Queen's enforcement mechanism itself. And once that happens, the palace stops treating this like estate management and starts treating it like a constitutional infection. But if challenges start circling trustees, the next question becomes unavoidable: who did the Queen trust to enforce this against Camilla, no matter what? Royal wars don't start with shouting, they start with paperwork. In this dramatized account, the palace lawyer reads the amendment twice, then a third time, because the language is too clean to be accidental. It doesn't insult, it doesn't accuse, it simply removes, and removal written by the Queen feels like a verdict that can't be appealed emotionally. In this dramatized story, Camilla doesn't explode, she calculates. Because outrage looks guilty, and silence looks strategic. So the counterattack begins the palace way: private appeals, carefully placed concerns, and a sudden push to frame the amendment as outdated, unfair, or misunderstood. Not to deny it exists, but to weaken what it means before the public ever hears a whisper. The palace doesn't need Camilla to shout for it to feel the pressure. It feels it in the sudden movement of allies, the careful reshaping of language, the way inheritance becomes administration in one breath and compassion in the next. In this dramatized account, Camilla's camp doesn't argue with the Queen's authority directly, it tries to change what the authority looks like. If the amendment can be framed as clerical, then challenging it becomes reasonable. If it can be framed as misunderstood, then resisting it becomes necessary. And if it can be framed as unfair, then anyone enforcing it can be painted as cold. That's why the pressure points are chosen like targets: advisors who can soften interpretations, trustees who can be persuaded, protocol committees who can hide decisions behind process. The emotional beat is brutal: Camilla publicly composed, privately cornered, because she understands what this really is. Not a debate, a boundary. And boundaries in royal life are never just personal, They are institutional decisions made to control who gets close to the future. Then the most dangerous sentence appears. Floated quietly like it's harmless, we can challenge the trustees. In this dramatized story, that line doesn't just threaten a legal skirmish, it threatens the enforcement mechanism itself. Trustees are the Queen's locked doors in human form. If you weaken trustees, you weaken intent. And if you weaken intent, you create space for influence to crawl back in through the cracks. In this dramatized account, Princess Anne isn't loud, she's absolute. And when the amendment surfaces, the palace senses her presence even before she speaks, because Anne is the kind of royal who treats legacy like law. If the Queen drew a line, Anne will guard it. Not out of cruelty, but doctrine. And doctrine is harder to break than emotion. Anne is framed as protector of boundaries, not negotiator of feelings. She doesn't soften the edge so the room feels comfortable. She sharpens the edge so the institution survives. Old resentments flare not shouted, but felt about outsiders gaining proximity, about sacred private power being treated like something that can be borrowed, shared, normalized. In this dramatized story, Anne doesn't see the amendment as an insult to Camilla. She sees it as a safeguard against precedent, because one exception becomes another, and soon the boundary is not a boundary anymore, it's a suggestion. Anne's leverage isn't performance. It's tradition, trust networks, and the Queen's intent. Intent is the most dangerous word in royal life because it turns the discussion from what people want into what they are allowed to do. And once Anne anchors the conversation in intent, Camilla's fight becomes harder. You can argue about fairness, you can argue about optics. But arguing against intent makes you look like you're arguing against the crown itself. That's why Camilla's realization lands like humiliation. The opposition is not personal, it's institutional. She isn't being denied by someone's mood. She is being blocked by a structure designed to hold firm under pressure. And then the cliffhanger arrives, delivered in the coldest possible tone. It's not open for discussion. Not we'll talk, not we'll review, not we'll consider. Closed. Foreshadowing turns the air metallic. Enforcement will be quiet, procedural and unstoppable. No dramatic confrontation, no public humiliation. Just doors that no longer open, permissions that never arrive, access that quietly disappears. And when enforcement becomes procedural, the palace doesn't ask who is right, it asks what survives. Every royal war ends in paperwork, but it also begins there. In this dramatized account, the amendment triggers a trail, letters, trustee notes, access logs, and a sealed instruction that explains why the Queen wanted this line drawn, and the palace panics. Because panic only happens when paper can't be spun. Once something is written clearly, it becomes record. And records don't care who feels offended. Because paper is the one thing the palace can't charm. A smile can soften a room. A speech can redirect public emotion. A carefully placed leak can poison a narrative. But a document, especially one stamped with the Queen's authority, sits there like a stone. It doesn't change its meaning depending on who reads it. It doesn't flinch. It doesn't negotiate. And in this dramatized story, that's why the amendment's discovery triggers a trail so fast it feels like the palace is bleeding ink. Memos appear. Integrity clauses are referenced. Internal reviews are activated, and none of it looks dramatic from the outside, because the palace doesn't do drama in writing. It does procedure, it does structure, it does language that sounds neutral while it moves power from one hand to another. This paper trail becomes the battlefield because it contains the only thing stronger than public sympathy: intent. Two possibilities fight for dominance inside the building. One is legitimate safeguard and instruction designed to protect the monarchy from consort influence growing too strong, too centralized, too protected by private assets. The other is strategic punishment and amendment designed not merely to safeguard, but to restrict, isolate and discipline Camilla through the coldest method available: governance. In this dramatized account, the terrifying part is that both can be true at once. Safeguards can be written with purpose and still be used as weapons. Paranoia spikes because the trail is too detailed to be harmless. Who leaked it? Who hid it? Who altered visibility? Who knew about this amendment and decided it should sleep until it was too late to challenge? The palace starts counting suspects the way it counts risks, quietly, relentlessly, with the calm of a machine that doesn't care who feels hurt. Because if the amendment was delayed or concealed, then the betrayal didn't come from outside the family, it came from inside the system. And then the emotional twist lands with real cruelty. Someone close to Camilla may have enabled the block unknowingly, not because they wanted to harm her, but because they signed something they didn't understand, agreed to something they didn't fully read, or followed a procedure they were told was routine. In royal life, the most devastating betrayals aren't always deliberate. Sometimes they're administrative. A signature that looked harmless at the time. A standard approval that becomes catastrophic when the wrong clause activates. A loyal aide trying to help, accidentally tightening the noose. That's why the warning message circulates like poison. Do not let this reach the press/parliament. Because once it reaches beyond palace walls, it stops being internal housekeeping. It becomes a constitutional story. A legitimacy story. A story about whether the monarchy is protecting itself from influence or tearing itself apart to do it. In this dramatized account, the palace doesn't fear scandal as much as it fears interpretation. Interpretation is where control dies. And the sealed instruction at the center of it all becomes the ghost nobody wants to name. It's referenced indirectly. It's described in fragments. It's treated like something too powerful to summarize aloud. But the implications are chilling. The amendment references future conduct or consort influence, suggesting the Queen anticipated pressure, predicted struggle, and designed a boundary meant to survive any emotional argument. Because the Queen didn't just leave property, she left rules. And when the palace tries to bury a document, the final truth becomes unavoidable. Someone is more afraid of what's written than what's whispered. In this dramatized story, the discovery doesn't end the controversy, it ignites it. Because once the Queen's amendment is real, everyone must choose, honor the boundary, or challenge it, and risk tearing open the monarchy's private rulebook in public. Camilla is forced to choose submit and survive, or fight and risk isolation. The palace smiles return, but trust fractures underneath. And insiders whisper the most chilling part: this wasn't the end. It was phase 1. The institutional aftermath comes first, because institutions always protect themselves first. Tighter controls. Fewer exceptions. More surveillance disguised as procedure. Access lanes narrowed. Staff instructed politely to remember correctly. Meetings scheduled with unusual urgency. Language becomes colder, sharper, more official. In this dramatized account, the palace doesn't want another surprise. So it builds walls faster than anyone can protest. The family fracture deepens quietly. No dramatic shouting. No public fight. Just polite unity masking permanent distrust. People start looking at one another as risks, not relatives. Conversations become careful. Alliances shift. The private warmth the palace sells to the world becomes performance. Because performance is safer than truth. A surprise beneficiary gains influence from the fallout, someone who profits when Camilla is weakened, when Charles is pressured, when uncertainty creates a vacuum. In royal life, vacuums attract power-hungry calm. The person who handles the crisis becomes indispensable, and indispensable people don't stay small for long. Then the final twist spreads like a shadow. The amendment hints there are more restricted assets, more sealed instructions, more boundaries written in the Queen's hand, waiting to activate under the right conditions. In this dramatized story, this isn't one isolated clause. It's a system. And systems don't stop with one target. That's why the end cliffhanger feels inevitable. Phase 2 targets roles, invitations, proximity. Who stands where? Who is seated where? Who is allowed in sensitive rooms? Who is quietly removed from the frame? And the tease for the next episode lands with dread. Another sealed instruction is found in the archives, another line, another boundary, another rule that threatens to redraw the palace map again. And as the palace doors close again, one reality settles in like a storm cloud. The amendment wasn't the scandal, it was the signal for the next royal war. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.